What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from SBMTG down there, youtube.com, we like magic. And something that a lot of people have been talking about in the comments section for the last couple of weeks, since Eldritch Moon came out, is Emerge. A lot of people excited about this mechanic, myself included. It looks like a super powerful mechanic, and turns out that it totally is. We've been building up this Sultai Emerge deck for a little over a week now, and I think we've definitely got something that is super powerful and can go really long and do a lot of cool tricks. So let's check her out. There are 32 creatures in our Bug Emerge deck. You gotta play a lot of creatures because you want to be sacrificing creatures to play creatures. Just, you gotta have a lot of creatures in a deck like this. So we're playing 32, and I want to talk about sort of the all-stars first, or at least why we're building the deck in the first place, all the Emerge creatures. We are playing 3 total things with Emerge, and they're all huge Eldrazi stuff. So let's check these out right now. We're playing 4 copies of Elder Deep-Fiend in the deck, 2 copies of Distended Mindbender, and then 1 copy of Decimator of the Provinces. I could go for a 3rd Mindbender, to be honest with you. I just don't know that I want to play 8 whole Emerge creatures in the deck, especially considering we'll be replaying some of these Emerge creatures, getting them out of the graveyard and playing them again. But 4 copies of Deep-Fiend, definitely. He's the most important creature in the deck. We need the whole playset. Not only can we lock our opponent out of playing spells if we tap down their lands during their upkeep, but these can chain into one another really well. And they're really effective with Sanctum of Ugin, which I'll probably mention a couple of times in this video, because it's so amazing in this deck. You can play 1 Deep-Fiend and merge it into play, and if you have a Sanctum out, you can go get another Deep-Fiend to chain together these things and just lock your opponent out of 2, 3 turns in a row. It's possible. So just chaining Deep-Fiends together is really, really effective as far as locking our opponent out of stuff. And Mindbender can just come down and win games sometimes, especially when it follows Deep-Fiend. If we've locked our opponent out of a couple of turns, or even just the 1 turn, getting a 2-for-1 out of this is much more likely, although it's really not a 2-for-1 because you sacrificed a creature. But getting 2 creatures, 2 cards out of their hand is much more likely when you follow a Deep-Fiend with it. But it's still pretty likely even when you just emerge it into play, you know, by itself early. So Mindbender is just really good, a very solid creature, but I don't want to play a whole bunch. Like I said, I could go for a 3rd copy. I could definitely see that being a thing. But Deep-Fiend is what we want to focus on here. And again, with Sanctum of Ugin, we can just search up Mindbender after Deep-Fiend if that's what we want to do. So, and we'll talk about this later, we've got a ton of card advantage in this deck. Nearly the entire deck is card advantage, so you're much more likely to draw these, 1 and 2 and 3 of copies. And then just the 1 copy of Decimator of the Provinces. Again, we can search this up pretty easily with Sanctum of Ugin and all of the card advantage that we're playing. I'll mention that a couple of times in the video. But Decimator is more of a late game, just win, There's another card, too, that can just come down and win the game, especially in a deck with 32 creatures. If we have enough time to build a good board state, then Decimator is just ridiculous. The card just wins the game a lot of the times. But again, it's like I said, it's late, so you don't have to draw it all the time. And with all the things we have that can search it up or just draw it more easily, I don't feel like we have to have a bunch of copies of Decimator. Those are our 7 Emerge guys, but we got to play a bunch of creatures up under them on the curve to support emerging them into play. Makes sense. So let's play all of the really, really high-value creatures in the format, starting with 4 copies of Den Protector and 4 copies of Deathmist Raptor here. The Dream Team, man, they've had a good role in this deck and a bunch of other decks since they've hit Standard. Obviously, in this deck, Den Protector can get back creatures that we've sacrificed for Emerge, and Deathmist Raptor is itself a great target to sacrifice for Emerge costs. So the synergy is actually even higher than normal with these 2 cards, which is really saying something. There's 2 format all-stars that are actually even better at what they do in this deck. This deck plays a bunch of 3-drops, mostly to help with Emerge. I've already talked about Deathmist Raptor. Again, great Emerge target he is, because he'll come back really easily. But we've got a bunch of other things in the deck that emerge really well, and they're all at the 3 mana slot. So let's take a look at those. There's 4 different things I want to talk about here. We've got 4 copies of Foul Emissary, 3 copies of Catacomb Sifter, and then just a couple of 1-ofs, 1 Matter Reshaper and 1 Nissa Vastwood Seer. Emissary gets a 4-of all day. Emissary is just about always going to put a card in your hand when it enters the battlefield. Digging through the top 4 and getting a creature is really, really good, you guys. And obviously its value with Emerge is just absurd. So it does get a playset, I would say. Catacomb Sifter is, I think, a little better than Eldrazi Sky Spawner in this slot. Although I will say Spawner is easier to cast, and it flies, which could be really important. People are playing Spirits a lot. But with so many creatures, though, a lot of those creatures will die, obviously. Not to mention, of course, we're merging stuff, so we'll get some scries off of Catacomb Sifter, definitely. And we can emerge him and still leave a creature behind, which I think is pretty important too. Matter Reshaper obviously creates value when emerged. A lot of people, when they do emerge examples in articles online, just Matter Reshaper is a go-to example. But I don't want to lean too heavily on this. We are playing, obviously, again, Sanctum of Ugin. In the mana base. We are playing too 8 different pain lands, and that's 12 good sources, but I don't want to play like 3 Matter Reshaper. I actually think there are kind of better things. Like, I think Catacomb Sifter is actually better in the slot. But I do want to play at least the 1 Matter Reshaper. Good card, obviously. And then Nissa, Vastwood Seer, smooths out land drops. Pretty important too to notice, by the way, that you want to, in this deck, emerge a 3-drop on turn 4 a lot of the time. And Nissa really helps you do that. Turn 3, play your Nissa, and that gets your 4th land so that you can guarantee an emerge next turn. That's important. And obviously she gets crazy late, just insane Planeswalker late. And she can be brought back with a couple of different things that we're doing in this deck. Wait till late game, you got your lands, go ahead and put your Nissa back into play with your Den Protector, put it in your hand, and then play it again. And suddenly, you'll have a huge Planeswalker. So this is just really good for a lot of different reasons. But I don't want to lean too heavily on her either. We're not playing a bunch of forests in the deck. We need some action on turn 2. I mean, that's a lot of 3-drops and a lot of stuff higher up on the curve. So we got to play some creatures we got to do something early in the game, basically. So I'm playing some pretty high value creatures here too. And I'll give you a choice, actually, on one of these. I definitely think we need to play 4 copies of Duskwatch Recruiter. We'll definitely do that. And then the choice here is between 4 copies of Deathcap Cultivator, or you can do 4 copies of Sylvan Advocate. Now, just like Foul Emissary, Duskwatch Recruiter will nearly always hit something when you dig with it. So, I really think we have to play Duskwatch Recruiter. But the really interesting thing here is the last slot, and this is up to you. Again, you could either go with Advocate or Cultivator, and I have actually, in my build, gone with Deathcap Cultivator. I know that doesn't sound quite right, but we really, really need to fix our black mana in this mana base. That is extremely important to me, at least, that we fix this. And it's also worth noting that any 2-drop that creates mana for you, a mana guy on turn 2, can be emerged in kind of the same way, sort of the same net value that a 3-drop could emerge. So that's kind of important to note too. But Advocate is maybe the best creature in the format next to, I don't know, like Spell Queller, a couple of other things. And it's just good defense on turn 2, which we need. And later he gets amazing, and again, just like Nissa, this can be brought back to the battlefield with a couple of things that we're doing and just be a huge, solid attacker. So I could see going with either one of these. I think Advocate is really good early game defense, which the deck needs, and can be great late, but really like the ramp from Cultivator, and I especially love that he fixes black mana for us. We're playing 4 non-creature, non-land cards here in the main deck, and we're going to split a playset between 2 copies of different cards here. We're going to play 2 copies of Oath of Nissa, and then 2 copies of, brace yourself, Liliana, Last Hope. I know she's really expensive right now. Hopefully we're not seeing another Jace in the making. I don't think she'll shoot to like $90. Really don't. And hopefully she'll cool off a little bit, but she is, I think, very close to worth that price tag. Very, very good Planeswalker in a lot of different things in this format. And she kind of looks jammed in this deck. At least I've had a talk with a couple of people, and they're like, Liliana looks jammed. Actually, not really. not really at all. She can get back creatures that we've emerged. That's the first thing you got to notice. She has decent defense, which we are really running low on in this deck, so that's very important. But everyone's talking about her synergy with Den Protector, running a 4-of Den Pro in the deck, and so I think it's important to play Liliana. It's the old, I guess it's already an old trick. People are talking about this, you can get your Liliana back with Den Protector, you can get your Den Protector back with Liliana, so they loop. But there's also a mini loop in this deck that's really important, where we can sack a Den Protector to emerge a big guy, and then we get the Den Protector back with Liliana. And if the big creature you emerged in dies, maybe by being sacked to emerge another big creature, then you can flip up your Den Protector and get back the creature you initially emerged. You can just do this over again if you want to. You can, play your you can play the emerged creature, sacrifice your Den Protector, put it in the graveyard, put it back in your hand with Liliana, and then just repeat. Lather, rinse, repeat. Really cool little mini loop here, and it can help you, especially if you have like 2 Deep-Fiends. Can be really, really nice. To be honest, that's actually one of these central things that the deck can do in the very, very late game. Sometimes you'll get in this little mini loop, which is a soft lock. Very, very soft lock, yes. But if you can just pull it off a couple of times, get a big emerger back and replay it, that can just be devastating. So really good trick we can do there, but we do have to get to the late game to pull it off. As far as Oath of Nissa goes, this is just action on turn 1, which is really nice. You know, we don't have anything else in the deck that we can do on turn 1 other than play a tap land, which we will do most of the time. But this will always draw us a card. I mean, pretty much. The situations where it doesn't are very, very few and far between. This will almost always draw us a card, and it goes well with Liliana the Last Hope. You know, it's hard to get 2 black mana sometimes on turn 3. So if turn 1 Oath can really, really help with that. Here's the mana base in the deck that I mentioned. Sanctum of Ugin is really important. We also get to play a bunch of pain lands in the deck so we can play Matter Reshaper more easily. And we're running Thought-Knot Seer in the board. So again, we can play him a little bit more easily with these pain lands and the Sanctum. Here's the board right here. That Hissing Quagmire in there for games that go a little bit longer. And because we've got some black cards in the sideboard that I want to more reliably cast. So we can either switch out a land or maybe even another card and put a 25th land into the deck. That's possible too. But, you know, obviously we've got Kalitas in the deck. You know, just Kalitas is very good. Evolutionary Leap I want to talk about though. Leap is amazing in this deck against things that want to remove our creatures. We really, really don't like sweepers in this deck. That's why we also have the 4 of Negate, because sweepers are just an awful thing to happen to us, and we don't want that to happen after so much setup. But Evolutionary Leap can really help against sweepers and spot removal and stuff like that. And we'll almost always get, you know, something pretty quickly and something with a lot of value, because a lot of our creatures are high value, if you didn't notice. A little bit more on that in just a second. Thought-Knot Seer I've already mentioned, and Transgress is very good right now. And then I guess the last thing is the World Breaker, which is pretty cool actually. I'd like to play the 1 copy in the main deck. I can see that happening. But the situations where this will work are, again, not few and far between, but not relevant against every deck in the format. We have to go pretty long in order to make the World Breaker trick work. But basically, to sum it all up, being able to lock your opponent out of whole turns with something like Elder Deep-Fiend and then blow up their lands with World Breaker can be absolutely devastating. Just, you know, Deep-Fiend into World Breaker can be absolutely crazy because you've locked them out of a bunch of turns where they haven't gotten to play stuff and now you're blowing up their lands. Like, it's just kind of sick. Here are your power rankings right here. A final score of 67. The deck does quite a lot of things well, but it could be a little more consistent. Not only could the mana be a little less shaky, I feel like the mana could be a little bit better in this deck, but, you know, if we don't get the right things to emerge at the right times, then things can fall apart. But we are still playing 32 creatures in the deck and a bunch of support, you know. And this is where I'll talk about all the card advantage. Let's just run through this real quick. Mindbender is sort of virtual card advantage, but as far as just the straight up card advantage, Den Protector is card advantage, Deathmist Raptor is virtual card advantage, Foul Emissary is card advantage, Catacomb Sifter provides scries, Matter Reshaper is card advantage, Nissa goes search up a forest, Duskwatch Recruiter card advantage. The only creature in the main deck really that's not is Deathcap Cultivator. Oath of Nissa card advantage, and Liliana also provides card advantage. Even a land, Sanctum of Ugin, card advantage. Like, just a lot of card advantage in this deck. We're either drawing cards or replacing cards in our hand after we play them, you know. So just a lot of action as far as that goes. So we're more easily going to draw those, you know, 2 and 3 of copies of things. So we try to be consistent by drawing a bunch of cards, but again, the mana could be much, much less shaky. Total cost of the main deck with the lands is about $185 on TCG Player, mostly because of Liliana. Now, you could cut her and play like Eldrazi Sky Spawners, maybe Whirler Rogues or Eyeless Watchers. I'll talk about that in just a second, too. So those are very, very budget alternatives to something like Liliana. And you could bring the deck down by, like, $80. So you could do that if you wanted to. And the sideboard is right around about $50, and that's mostly because of Kalitas and Thought-Knot Seer. So if you wanted to cut those from more budget options like Aerial Volley, perhaps, I could see you doing that. Altogether, you could get out the door for about $100 here. If you wanted to build this super competitive version, which I suggest getting Liliana, it'll cost you about $235 after getting the sideboard, which honestly, that's not the best budget ever, right? But at least we're not spending like $400 on a standard deck. Actually, for an even more budget version of this deck, which I totally support, Saffron Olive over at MTG Goldfish just the other day made a green-blue, a Simic Emerge deck, which uses a lot more Simic, Decimator of the Provinces. And what he's doing is he's using things like Whirler Rogue and Eyeless Watcher to create a bunch of tokens, and then once you play your Decimator of Provinces, you have this big wide board that gets huge all of a sudden. That deck looks pretty solid to me, and I highly suggest you go check him out. I've been doing a lot of, you know, fellow YouTube creator love lately, and I really think Saffron deserves it an awful lot. Very, very good YouTube deck builder, and you should go check him out, seriously. But that's all we got for this one. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed it or how you think we could change the deck to shake it up, or which one you'd rather play. Deathcap Cultivator, Sylvan Advocate. I went with Cultivator here, but there's definitely an obvious argument for Advocate. So let me know how you went on that, and what are we doing next time? Well, next time, I want to do a purely budget deck. I've been doing a lot of these very competitive decks lately, or at least the price is competitive. So I want to do something for like $30, $35 next time. It's going to be green-red aggro, which I think is actually a really fun-looking deck. We'll try that out. And 4-color Eldritch Evolution. That deck is also coming. This deck won over it in the comments battle. But I still am, I've got that deck actually completely ready, and it's still happening soon. Secret video may come next, or it may come after Green Red Aggro, not sure. And I'm going to put some music, I promise, very soon now. I'm going to put some music, at least some finished instrumentals, on both the channel and SoundCloud pretty soon. I know a lot of people asking for that. I am going to do it very soon, I promise. Actually, that's all we have for now. Appreciate you guys sticking around for that long-winded outro. Like the video, please do that. Don't forget to just like the video. It takes 2 seconds. Awesome when you do that. It helps a lot. And I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching, my wizards.